Welcome to the dissection. Today we are joined by Nobuntu Hlazo Webster. She's a member of parliament, fresh out the box in parliament. Welcome, 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 Nobuntu.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really happy to be here.
Thanks. And I think we're going to have a great conversation. But for those who don't know you, let me just read your bio out for them so that they get to know who exactly you are, what party you represent, and then we'll jump into it. So, Nobuntu Hlazo Webster is a member of parliament representing Build One South Africa, a political party which exists as a vehicle to unearth and elect homegrown leaders in communities across the country. She's also a co founder and deputy leader of the party. But that's not her only role. She's been doing a lot. She's also the founder of the South African Women's Commission, which assembles women from all walks of life to collaborate in contributing to change in South Africa. And she's a respected business leader. Ms. Hlazo Webster has led numerous development and advocacy organizations, including the Business Women's Association of South Africa as its chairperson, the International Women's Forum as president of its youth chapter, and the KwaZulu-Natal Youth Chamber of Commerce as the regional chair and the provincial secretary general. Ms. Nobuntu Hlazo Webster is also an alumni of Future Elect, the United States IVLP, and an International Women's Forum fellow. She has been recognized with numerous accolades from the Business Women's Association of South Africa and the Department of Economic Development, to name a few. She holds a Bachelor in Philosophy honors degree and several postgraduate business qualifications. She sits on various NPO boards and is involved in numerous community activities. She has been married to her husband, Ayanda Webster, since 2007. That's quite a long time. That's a stable marriage. And they are together blessed with 2 sons. So, Nobuntu, that's quite a bio, hey? That's quite a bio. And now you're a member of parliament. So my first question would be,
awkward to listen to.
I know, it puts everyone in like, because you have to listen to it and then you have to look humble and then you can't be like, yeah, no, yimlo, inginja. You have to almost, I still don't have, when people read my bio, I still don't have the perfect poker face for it.
No, I don't know what you're supposed to do.
But you know what? Even before I go to my first question, in as much as there's this expectation of humility, these are things you did. This is the journey that you've walked that has taken you to the seats of power and to the streets of power as a lawmaker, you know? And in a way, we shouldn't be apologetic when people have accomplished. And that's sometimes our challenge in the Black communities. How do we deal with excellence? Because on the one level, we're just people, you and I. But on another level, if people have accomplished and in the accomplishment deposit, their bank balance is high, we also have to recognize that, hey, we're dealing with accomplished seasoned people. And we struggle with that sometimes. But well done. And hopefully you keep adding to this CV so that it has more pages. It needs to take 5 minutes to read.
Hey, no, it does. And to what you're saying, the truth is I think the importance of a bio, more than even just the accomplishments, which I agree, we need to get more comfortable with that, especially as Black people. But I think the importance of it is about the journey and about seeing a thread in someone's life. I mean, I always say for me, the thread, first of all, is that I'm a leader since I was a kid. That's who I am. And I think that's something that you pick up in my bio. The second is I am about economic justice and economic transformation. And you will pick in my bio. It's always been who I am and what I'm about. Even the business, even being in business for me was about that. It was about how do I start playing in a space where I can contribute to the growth and the economic growth of other young people, especially South Africa's young people, give them a platform to not only get skills, but also to be able to go and do the same thing, you know, and contribute to the economy. But also, more than anything, I had come out of an early career where I'd grown very quickly in corporate, but struggled with the fact that I'd look at the letterhead and I would see names of people I could not identify with, you know, and now this is like almost, 20 years ago. And I would sit and think, yeah, at which point am I going to be part of or drive or lead an organization where the names on that letterhead are what I can identify with? The name of that letterhead, me, and others like me. And so economic transformation and economic justice has always been, at the core of what I do. And that's the thread that you can get in something like a
Yeah, no, and I think it's very clear. It's very clear. So, Nobuntu, my first question is just a personal question. What has changed since you became a member of parliament in your life? What is this experience like? Because often we see it from, the swearing in and some of the maiden speeches and all of that, but we never get to ask the individual, what is it like, this transition from being, just an ordinary South African, being a candidate and actually being there in parliament? It's a realization of a dream to a degree. What is it like? What's changed?
First of all, it's not as glamorous as I think everyone thinks it is. I think, people see the swearing in, people see State of the Nation, people even see the debates that happen and the drama of the debates. But there's so much work that happens that actually people have access to that they don't access. Those portfolio committees in Parliament, those administrative committees that set up the rules in Parliament, that is the hard yards of Parliament. And the reality is that I'm in a party where there's two of us in Parliament. So that means there is a lot of work for us to do if we are to represent the people who voted for us and represent South Africa, give weight to that representation. There's a lot of work we've got to do. And so that has been very sobering, and the weight of the work that we have to do has been very sobering. I'm one who's never shied away from hard work, so I'm right at home. In fact, I work best when there's a lot that's happened. So that's been how things have transpired over the past month, because now it's been a month. It has been interesting to also just get to know the nitty-gritty and be part of some of the change, given that we have a formation that looks very different to what we've ever had in the history of South Africa. To sit on those rules committees, program committee, chief whips forum, and be making the rules about the representation of South Africans, accountability, the representation of opposition in a parliament that looks different than it's ever looked, has been, my geek self has been in heaven. Just like thinking through all this, it's been incredible.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I mean, but I'm sure there have been some disruptions, because you're based in Joburg, you have to move to Cape Town, you family, husband, all of the jazz. So I think you're downplaying it a bit, but let's keep moving. Let's keep moving, because you spoke about committees.
No, let me talk to you about that. Let me not leave that out.
Yeah.
So I live in Joburg. My home is in Joburg. I have two sons and I have in Joburg, and I'm here. So what it's meant is that during the week I'm here, and they're in Joburg. It's meant I am traveling so much, and that is exhausting. Just the travel in itself is exhausting. Trying to settle in your new city. So all this is happening. A new role. It's a public role. It's like I said, it's a lot of work. I sit on 7 committees. It's plenaries and debates in public, plus also adjusting to being in a new city, but also half being. That is a lot. I do stuff like now. I've had to find ways to make it work. So I do Zooms with my kids every evening when I am back at my place in time to do that. At 7 to 8 is the Zooms with the kids, doing with my 10-year-old over Zoom, reading with him, because I don't want to miss that part of it. And just catching up with my 15-year-old over Zoom. That's what I'm doing. And so, there is that.
That's a lot, because you're still a mom and you have to be present in these critical years. Now, they're saying to their schoolmates, my mother is a member of parliament. I'm sure there's at least a perk there.
No shame. They are. They're so proud. On last week, Saturday, I flew back into Joburg on Saturday morning and went straight to my 10-year-old soccer match. And when I waved, I overheard or saw him say to his mates on the soccer field, he's like, oh, my mom said she just flew in from Cape Town from Parliament. Straight, and I was like, that is cute. That is cute.
I think that's great. The greatest, I think, honor for a parent is to know that your children are proud of you and what you're doing.
Absolutely. No,
And that's a
absolutely.
living blessing to you, to know that
Ab-
even as they're growing, the example I've set for them is one
ab-
of excellence, one of achievement, and one where they can really say, that's my mom, with
Mhm.
pride, not to say, no, just my mom, I love her, but also, hey, my mom matters in this whole 62
Right,
million situation. That's my
right.
mommy right there. Yeah, no, so well done on that. Let's move to the committees. You said you're sitting on about 12, but I know you've got three that are directly facing you. That's small business, water, trade, and industry. And then there's the rules committees and all of these other committees. Explain to those who don't follow this stuff. What is a committee? What's your role in a committee? And what are you trying to accomplish now that you are in these committees? Did you choose them? Give us the tea on these committees.
Sure. So I sit on 7 committees, not 12. Don't make me more of a
Seven.
superwoman than what
Okay,
I
seven.
7. So the 3 are administrative committees, and they're about the running of parliament. They're about the rules of parliament. And people think it's just technical stuff. Yes, it's
Mm,
technical stuff. It's important because ultimately it speaks to how you are represented. It speaks to how your voice is represented by a party like mine. So those are the 3. And yeah, you're asking specifically about the portfolio committees. I then sit in 4 portfolio committees, and it's trade, industry, and competition. It's small business, it's water and sanitation, and it's basic education.
mm,
Um, so what do we do in these committees? So over the past few weeks, what we've been doing in these committees is we've been getting the plans of these respective portfolios or departments and their budgets and reviewing them. I mean, the process of it is sitting in that committee, reviewing those plans and those budgets, but ultimately it lands up with a vote in parliament as to whether you endorse or support them or you reject them. So ultimately,
mm,
that's what it ends up. That's what we were doing in the appropriation bill vote, which took place, and debate, which took place
mm,
so that's ultimately what it is. My role and what I see my role as being, I'll make an example. I, for one, feel that the small business development budget, which is just over 2 billion, it's 2% of the total national budget,
mm,
is really small.
mm,
And the reason for that is that you have an NDP that has said that by 2030, we need to have 90% of new jobs
mm,
coming from SMMEs.
mm,
Now we currently have around 30% or just a little less, and it's
mm,
6 years old. So the reality is that how can you accomplish that with such a small budget?
mm,
But also, I mean, what the NDP stated was correct in that for economies like ours, what has turned them around economically is the role of SMMEs and their
mm,
contribution
mm,
to GDP and to employment creation. So it
mm,
is correct. Then you need to be able to make sure that if you have those kinds of goals, you then fund adequately. So part of the role in a portfolio committee is to look at the plans, is to look at what portfolios or departments have said are their priorities and assess, are you budgeting according to these priorities that you've
mm,
outlined? Is that visible in the way that you have allocated funds, even in your priorities as a department? That's the first. The second is to then look at the plan and be able to contribute to the plan in saying that perhaps this isn't the way to go about accomplishing what we need to accomplish in this
mm,
portfolio. It's to challenge and critique the plan and bring contributions to what it looks like. My own assessment of the reports that we've had from the 6th administration on the performance of the portfolio of small business development, as
mm,
well as is that the plans don't have the kind of KPIs that will mean we actually see real
mm,
transformation,
mm,
economic, and a real contribution by SMMEs and real support by SMMEs. I said the other day, it's just vibes. It really
mm,
is. Exercise. We had set out to train to support so many SMMEs or to train them, and we have think with it. But ultimately, how many SMMEs over this period have become sustainable and have grown? Percentage have they grown? How many jobs have they created? That's not what is being spoken to, not in the plan and not in the reports. And so for me, a specific contribution is to say that in that portfolio committee. And I hope that example helps in terms of what we can do.
Yeah, you know, I went over some of the department plans, their medium-term plans as well for small business. And, you know, whenever you see people not giving their examples and case studies up front, you know that konok shamans, you know, because if you go to Y Incubator, for example, which is the, I think, Stanford University linked startup incubator, which is really famous, where Sam Altman of OpenAI and many other companies came from. When you go there, their profile is front and center. Here are all the startups we created. Here are the CEOs. Here's how much we gave them. And go check. You know who our winners are. But in the small business space, you don't see a lot of front loading of the examples. And that always is a concern, you know, and it makes me think about that famous book, Measure What Matters. In that, are we really measuring what matters? And in another context, is there even urgency? Because sometimes I feel that when I listen to government ministers, they are too comfortable in the sense that they come and they say, well, here's my strategic plan, here's my 5-year thing, I'm moving at this pace, etc., etc. But the building is burning down. You need to move like a fireman, not move like a researcher or a professor at a university working on their PhD, where you feel like, well, in 4 years I'll show you guys something. Then we'll talk about it. And I often get that sense in a lot of departments where I feel that there's urgency. You know, even just to use a different department where, you know, policing, I would have expected the Minister of Police to be more upfront about his plans, about what he's going to be doing, because the murder rate is going up every day. The unemployment rate is going up every day. We know small businesses are struggling. I think what I would say is that, can you look into this bank issue? Because one of the numbers I bumped into when I was doing my own research is that even though our banks are ranked 19th in the world, our funding for small businesses is 96th in the world. And that's a big gap. And the banks are what is typically described as risk averse or conservative in terms of risk appetite. But if we're talking about how small business is the incubator for growth, for employment, and we can see that there's such a big discrepancy because on one side, you're 19th overall, but one of your weakest indicators as a banking sector is that you're not funding small businesses enough. I think that's a good space as well from the small business side of things to also look, because it's going to take a while to increase that budget, you know, and I think it's a good fight. 2 billion is too little. And I don't even think a lot of it is going to the SEFA side of it, which is the finance agency, the small enterprise finance agency. More has to go that side as opposed to some of the places where it's going. So good luck in that fight. And hopefully you can look into that banking question as well, because there's something there.
Absolutely. The other thing is that government should be underwriting the risk small and medium enterprises. So when you speak about SEFA even, and I absolutely agree, there needs to be more appropriation for SEFA. But even beyond that, even once you have a SEFA, there are many, many people who actually don't qualify for funding, because the criteria is almost similar to the banks, to banks. So you also the state needs to underwrite. And what that means is the state needs to make sure that there are bankable business plans. And then this department needs to make sure that those enterprises are better supported, you know, because they know then that this is our investment. There's high risk here. We have to make sure that it works. It's a win-win in that in that way as well, because then the departments and the state has more skin in the game. And they have to make sure that the outcomes we spoke about earlier, to say that, are we seeing the outcomes and are we measuring for the right things? We will be measuring for the right things because it's in the game, because they will have underwritten some of the risk. There just isn't enough of that, not only in the commercial banks, as you allude to, but particularly even in the institutions that should be funding SMMEs in this country.
Yeah. So hopefully you can lobby for that. Let's keep it moving. what are your biggest challenges as a Black woman in politics? Because it's a space that still doesn't have enough women participating and women participating as leaders. It was very refreshing to see you, a few other women, Vuyisa Ramokgopa of Rise Mzansi is another example, really pushing politics at a national level and doing so with excellence and grace and class and panache and all of that. But what have been your experiences?
It is rough. I mean, it is so rough. I think one of the most important things is for women to actually support one another and stick together. For instance, Wieswa and I have a really good relationship because the first thing that people do when they see two strong women or they see women that are in positions of power is that they want to pit them against each other. I mean, that's been one of the things that I've noticed. And so I think it's important that we support one another, that we back one another, because it is rough. It is a very male-dominated space. And sometimes, it can be deceiving because you look and you see a whole bunch of women. You're like, no, there are women in the space. You see them represented in parliament. But I want to say that in Rwanda has the highest representation of women in parliament at almost 70%. But what is the agency of those women that are in parliament? At parliament in Rwanda, when you actually do a deep dive and you start to research more and you start to engage more with some of what is actually happening there, you realize that actually those women are not using their agency or don't have agencies, and their agency and proxies for men, in this instance, mostly for the president. It is supposedly a controversial thing to say, but it is what it is. That's actually what. So you see women, and we see women even in this country, and we think, oh, no, great. We've got women, but why have we never had a woman president in this country? Why? Even in the political parties, when you look at that top two, president, deputy, I know that I can say I'm one of very few in this country, maybe one or two, who can say that's where I sit in a political party. And someone would argue, it's because you're a co-founder of the party. And maybe it is the right argument, because we've looked, and when we look at other instances, women make it to that top 6 that sits as a structure in a lot of the political parties, but never to the top 2.
And women vote in higher numbers than men. So you would anticipate that we'd be close to a woman president. But unfortunately, like you're saying, that top 2 is not materializing in the same way. And I think it's always important to think about meaningful representation, because in some places and spaces, you can have a Black man advocating against the interest of the Black community. You can have, an African person in Europe advocating against the interests of the African community as a continent. So it's often good to examine beyond the superficial to say, okay, yes, we share an identity, but do we share goals and objectives? And do we share ideology as it speaks to that particular identity?
Absolutely. I mean, so having said that, what I had said in our party, like when we started the party, the women were all saying, where's our women's league? Where's our women's league? And I pushed back against that because I wanted to see women leading in the party without finding that, they find leadership only in a woman's chapter of the organization, because that's what I've seen in political parties. It's not to say we'll never have one, but I felt it important that we see women leading in the mainstream structures of the party before we start forming a women's chapter that deals with the issues of women. It's important for me. And those are some of the things that we need to do. I advocate for women leadership, and I fight for women leadership where I am, including in the party as well. And so that's important. But back to what it has been like being a woman. Like I say, it is a boys' club, and you a lot of times have to remind people that I'm not here as a token, just in the world of politics. There are people who make the assumption that you are there as a token, and often you have to remind people that no, I'm a decision maker here, I'm a leader here. And I have that respect in my party, and it's not questionable in my party.
Yeah.
But when you come to the general landscape, and operating in politics outside of your own party with other leaders, that's something that you find that you're often having to remind people of, and no, I need to be here in this conversation.
Yeah.
Because this is my party. So the reality is that it is male dominated, that, some of the even lobbying that's happening, even here in parliament, you see that a lot of it is happening amongst men, and, it's men lobbying amongst, and almost, undermining the influence of women. And so it's something you're often having to push back against, and to fight. Yeah.
Wow. So I wanna ask you a parting question, and I think there's value to that last part. If you see ukuthi bakudelela noma bakubona kancane, then you can sometimes use that as an advantage, because then you get to see who's really bigoted in their thinking, who's really not a real broker. Because if already they are trying to not acknowledge you, then it allows you to observe them more than they are observing you. Sometimes being underestimated can be an asset. But of course, it's a testament to a failure in a society when everyone who ought to be treated equally is sometimes overlooked or whatever. But it still allows you, when you're slept on, to really surprise them. But I hope this interview doesn't now allow them to say,
"Oh, my tactics." But it is, being undermined can be such a gift. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's you must leverage what you have, and often, that can be a gift. And I always say, I believe in the adage that cream rises to the top. Or whether people undermine you or they don't, whether they see you or they don't, cream rises to the top. And it will happen, and it happens. And eventually, sometimes, you wouldn't have wanted them to, but sometimes they turn around and they're like,
my uncle also used to say that to me all the time. It used to be frustrating. If I was struggling with maths, he'd just be telling me, well, no matter where you place it, cream, it rises to the top. And then I'm looking at my marks and I'm like, so is this me not being creamy? So he used to use it as a challenge.
Be cream.
Yeah, no, but my maths marks were fine at the end, so it worked. And it's true in any event, because I think it's about you work out solutions that allow you to be able to execute on your objectives, your goals and aspirations. So even if they start you at the bottom, because of what you're made of, you will eventually figure it out. And I think that's true. So my last question to you, just so that we keep this within the time limits, is what are your hopes for South Africa going forward? Because it is a very new period. We've got this coalition situation. We've got all of these people vying for attention. We've got different permutations and combinations in local government. We're hearing of mayors who may leave in Johannesburg. We're seeing all different types of formations. And I think almost the birthing pains of real coalition in South Africa. So it's a tumultuous time in a way, but in the same time, it's a very hopeful time, because in a different period, we wouldn't have an Ubuntu Hlazo Webster, because we'd have one or two parties dominating the political space. So what are your hopes for the country going forward?
My hopes for the country going forward are, first of all, an embracing of multi-party democracy. I think we got very used to one or two party dominant states, and in our instance, really a one party dominant state. It delivered things like state capture, but we thought that was, all we had. We thought it's what we had. I think this administration gives us an opportunity to actually see multi-party democracy at play. I said earlier, it has been my biggest privilege to actually be part of a parliament that is a multi-party parliament, and to be working out how should that work, how should the voices of these diverse constituencies be represented. So I'm hoping that as South Africans, we start to embrace that, and that we start to strengthen our democracy in that way, that we start to see coalitions working. Because when you have the right kind of coalitions, that's when you can have a platform for accountability to thrive. and for delivery to thrive. So that's the first. The second is that my hope is for economic transformation. I think for what this should then deliver is economic transformation. It should deliver delivery to the people of this country. It should deliver a change in the lives of the people in this country. It should deliver not only, we speak in our party about a job in every home, not only a job in every home, but ownership in the economy. Africans being able to say, I have a piece of this economy and I'm playing and I'm contributing to it growing. That is really my hopes and dreams for this country. It should deliver a country where a young person is able to say, I have seen government work. I always say there's a generation that has never seen government work, never gone to a healthcare center that works and that works for them. Home Affairs has worked for them. The education system hasn't worked for them. Their parents aren't working, so the economic system hasn't worked for them. The roads and infrastructure aren't working. They don't have a home, so human settlements hasn't worked for them. A whole system that has not worked for them. I hope that this will be the start of delivering a South Africa where there's a generation that can say, I have seen government work for me. I have seen leaders who work for me and have me and my interests and my future at heart.
Well, there's no better place to leave it than there. Best of luck for this particular year and the whole administration. Thank you so much, Nobuntu, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure.